Instead of reviewing the episode where Jenny gets dropped off at a preschool, which is really infamous, I wanted to review one of the other bad episodes from this show. And one of the episodes I'm going to be talking about is Last Action Zero. The episode starts off with the Quail, who is the villain of this episode, enjoying his time at a volcano swimming in lava. But then Jenny arrives to stop him. But apparently, the biggest issues with this episode is having Brad being the sidekick. Here's the issue I have with this, is that they tried to have Brad be in this focus, have Brad be a major focus in this episode by trying to be Jenny's sidekick. But the thing is, he doesn't have any of the powers or abilities of what Jenny has. So it's honestly really stupid to actually see him doing this kind of stuff to begin with. And when Jenny tries to stop the critter, Brad just completely gets in the way while completely stopping Jenny from stopping the situation. Look, this is... when it comes to Brad, I found him tolerable, but in this episode, he's really unlikable, and the fact that he really doesn't do a lot whatsoever in the first 3 minutes of this episode. Now, to be quite honest, the first minutes of this episode makes him likable, but for the majority of this episode, he isn't like that, but we're gonna get to that soon. As far as I'm concerned, the screenshots that you're seeing right now is just Jenny just trying to stop the villain of this episode, but she ends up getting destroyed by him because Brad just keeps getting in the way. I honestly think that what Brad is doing in this episode isn't considered helping out whatsoever. And the fact that Jenny spent most of her time just fighting crime from her own journeys throughout the entire world, there's really no point of her just having Brad coming along, especially that Tuck and Sheldon are not being seen in this episode. Believe me, this image that I'm showing you right now, despite not being the full attention of what this episode was originally going to be about when it comes to Brad doing any of this dangerous stuff, it just really sums up of everything onto why this screenshot is the thumbnail. So anyway, when they get captured and about to be taken down by the critter, there's a ship with a freezing gun that completely freezes the critter, and especially the lava, and completely taking the critter into the ship. They're called the Skyway Patrol, and this actually caught Brad's interest on joining him so that he can become a Skyway Patrol in order to protect anything of what's happening, just like Jenny. However, the biggest difference is that Jenny actually takes this stuff seriously, while the Skyway Patrol, as much as Brad needs to learn on becoming a Skyway Patrol person, this episode really goes to show that it's just hammering on what Brad is going through. We've already reached to the point that Brad just completely ruined Jenny's chances on stopping the critter in this. And when Brad completely gets away, Jenny's just surrounded by the other critters around her. You know, if she can't be able to handle any of this kind of stuff, shouldn't she just evacuate and just find some different solution to stop them? I know this is a way to have Brad able to save her from completely failing on her mission, but we lead to what Brad is doing once he arrives at the Skyway Patrol. Now, it is shown that these people can actually fight anything that comes into the way, but Brad just decides to take the easy way. It just assumes that if he wears a suit and completely be part of the Skyway Patrol, he would instantly join forces with Jenny. However, what this episode is mainly about Brad doing paperwork constantly. That's the majority of what this episode is just Brad doing paperwork, which is something that does happen if you're ever doing this kind of stuff in the real world, but the difference is that that's what Brad does throughout the majority of this episode. He doesn't learn new skills whatsoever. he doesn't train, he doesn't actually learn his mistakes, he completely does paperwork. It's really boring, and if this was meant for comedy, it's done for one of the wrong reasons, and every bit of comedy in this isn't really humorous, mainly the fact that we see characters just completely giving Brad a hard time, and at the same time, of how they're executing this, I can really tell that the purpose in this really makes them one of the weakest of the entire cartoon, but we're gonna get to that later. So, while Brad is just trying to do the paperwork, Jenny is dealing with a situation that she's completely handicapped with the other rock creatures, or the Quail Critters, or whatever you call them. I would easily, like I said, that this is a way to have Brad save Jenny in some other way, but for how it's executed, it's honestly one of the weakest ways to have Jenny be betrayed in a situation, while have Brad just be in the Skyway Patrol, just doing more paperwork. Seriously, how is this considered something that can make this episode entertained by having Jenny just waiting while Brad's just do paperwork before becoming an actual Skyway Patrol person? As a matter of fact, it really makes this episode really pointless. When it comes to the preschool episode, despite how unexistent it is, the plot of the episode is still infamous to talk about, but here, I think that the reasons onto why people barely talk about this is mainly a fact of how Brad is in these situations while Jenny is being portrayed as also being a hero, but at the same time cannot be able to face off so many rock creatures around her. And at this point, the jokes in this is honestly mostly forced, and it really doesn't even work and it doesn't even help that it makes this episode really hard to actually see Brad taking this stuff seriously. If the Skyway Patrol is like this, I honestly think that Brad will be better off if he actually knew what the whole thing is about, instead of just joining them. Granted, Jenny actually warned Brad of what the Skyway Patrol is like, but at the same time, they really made Brad still unlikable on just joining the Skyway Patrol. Sure, he wasn't this unlikable when it comes to helping Jenny, but still. And what makes this even really miserable is the fact that at the end of the episode, well, the Skyway Patrol was there the entire time, despite the fact that they didn't even bother to stop anything going on. Brad's completely see that Jenny's completely in trouble, and after doing every paperwork and completely is fed up with it, the person who's in charge of the Skyway Patrol actually sees that the rock creatures is completely breaking news. Not to mention that Jenny is about to have his brain being eaten by the Quail Critters. And then Brad finally freezes all the Quail Critters to frozen block of ices. Well, not really block of ices, but you know what I mean. And this just leads to them just working together on stopping the rock creatures. And the episode ends with about paperwork, and the paperwork thing as well. The Skyway Patrol people just can't be able to arrest Jenny or Brad because they don't have paperwork or courts or any of that kind of stuff in order to have some kind of proof. And they don't have any forms, so the episode ends with them getting buried with a lot of papers while Jenny and Brad just completely heads off home. Yeah. This episode is really, 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 really planned, and even though it's not as bad as the preschool episode, I really want to do something different because people have been talking about that episode for way longer than necessary. So for a major change, I'm going to be reviewing this episode instead. For me personally, the bad episodes from this show are really different compared to the other bad episodes I talked about in Cartoon Crisis of this month. But at the same time, it really makes everything in this honestly hard to actually have any enjoyment out of when you see Brad being portrayed this way and seeing Jenny despite being in character, it doesn't even excuse the fact that she's being really overpowered by rock creatures instead of just evacuating and just trying to figure out a different solution to stop the crater critters. This episode really sums up everything onto why I honestly think that this show isn't really the best when it comes to its bad episodes. Granted, like I said, this episode isn't as terrible as the preschool episode, but when you have Brad, who is mainly Jenny's friends, as the main focus and also just trying to do a good deed by helping Jenny stop the main villains of the episode, it had some kind of potential. I will admit, it may work, but for how it's portrayed and how on having Brad just messing everything up, and then when we get to see him join the Skyway Patrol, it makes this episode really worthless, and it doesn't help that the fact that the majority of this episode is mainly about paperwork and nothing else. If you're gonna say that this is the joke of the entire episode, it doesn't excuse the fact that it made Brad really worthless in this, other than just doing paperwork. I mostly felt bad for him for doing this kind of stuff, even though he joined and signed without doing any reading or any information to be heard about the Skyway Patrol. But it doesn't excuse anything whatsoever of how this episode is just trying to be hilarious, but then it just ends up being really worthless and meaningless. As far as I'm concerned, these are the type of episodes that just doesn't work for a cartoon like this. I know for a while that even though that My Life as a Teenage Robot isn't really one of the best cartoons, it's still one of the better Nicktoons. And I honestly think that it could have done a lot more better than what they were doing for this episode. I would think that Brad could have learned a lesson on just trying to become really helpful with this, but when you completely see him, what he's been doing in the earlier minutes of this episode, and just seeing him completely helping Jenny on just stopping the crater critters, or the main villain of this, it honestly makes the majority of this episode really worthless and really meaningless. And as far as I'm concerned, I honestly think that this entire episode just sums up onto why the Skyway Patrol is honestly one of the weakest characters from this show, since they're just portrayed as unprepared. Well, even though that they're completely good at fighting crime and stuff like that, they're still not great at paperwork and stuff. And the fact that they also return on just trying to find Jenny while he's having a sleepover with Crushing Cousins. The Cousins episode. I'm sorry, I keep forgetting the names, but I'm just proving my points. Overall, this episode is just plain weak, and since this is one of the first episodes I'm reviewing for Cartoon Crisis 2, expect to be a lot of terrible episodes coming for the later weeks of this month. Believe me, when I'm completely reviewing the least bad episodes, I'm getting to one of the worst episodes, so just keep that in mind. But as for this episode, I'm giving it a 4 out of 10.